Well, hello all again to this session of the Global Hands-on Universe Conference 2021. I'm pleased actually to welcome and introduce our guest keynote speaker, Dr. Tresch Fienberg. Hello, Rick. How are you?
Hello, I'm very good, thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Tresch is a press officer of the American Astronomical Society. He's a senior contributing editor. He was also a former editor-in-chief of Sky and Telescope magazine. And he's co-creator of the Galileo Telescope Educational Telescope Kits, which was actually a cornerstone project during the International Year of Astronomy 2009. In Morocco, actually, we got some of those Galileo telescopes, and they were quite helpful actually for our students and kids. He's now completing his 3-year term as president of the International Astronomical Union Commission, C2, which is basically communicating astronomy with the public. So he will be talking to us about Sky and Telescope, Gateway to the Universe. So you have 45 minutes for your talk, and then we spare some 15 minutes question and answers. So welcome again, Rick, and thank you for being with us in this conference.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here, and I appreciate the invitation to speak. So hello, everybody. Here's a quick outline of my talk. I'm going to begin by giving a brief history of Sky and Telescope magazine, and then I'm going to switch gears and move into Sky and Telescope's role in education. And I will look at it in the past, the present, and the future. So let's start out back in 1929. The earliest ancestor of Sky and Telescope was a 4-page bulletin called the Amateur Astronomer that was started by the Amateur Astronomers Association in New York. That is still one of the largest astronomy clubs in the United States. 6 years later, the American Museum of Natural History opened up in New York City. And the original Hayden Planetarium, which has since been rebuilt, opened up that year. And the museum and the planetarium started a bulletin called The Sky, which eventually became a monthly magazine. And here's a copy or a picture of one of its covers. So very quickly thereafter, The Sky absorbed into itself the newsletter that had been coming out of the Amateur Astronomers Association. Now, a few years later, the museum figured out that it really wasn't in the business of producing a magazine, couldn't afford to keep going. So they asked one of their lecturers, Charlie Federer, who was working in the Hayden Planetarium, if he would agree to take on the magazine, and he did. He agreed to take it on and create a publishing company to keep it going, and he named himself the editor-in-chief and his wife, Helen Spence Federer, as the managing editor. And the newly formed Sky Publishing Corporation produced its first issue of The Sky the following year in 1940. Meanwhile, half a continent away in the middle of the United States, Perkins Observatory in Ohio launched its own quarterly magazine called The Telescope, named for the 69-inch telescope or 175-centimeter reflector that it had just opened that year, and that was at the time the world's 3rd largest telescope. A few years later, though, the director of Perkins, who was also the editor of The Telescope, Harlan Stetson, moved to Harvard College Observatory in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he brought the magazine with him. So the observatory became the publisher, and in the course of events that year, they increased the magazine's frequency to bi-monthly, which means every other month instead of quarterly. And then a happy accident occurred. This is 1939. Charles and Helen Federer were at the World's Fair in New York City, and a number of Harvard College Observatory staff were there too. And somehow or another, amid the huge crowds, they ran into each other. The observatory staff invited Charlie and Helen to move to Cambridge and take over the telescope, because just like the Hayden Planetarium in New York years before, they really didn't think they had the time or the money to be publishing a regular magazine. So within a couple of years, the Federers had relocated to Cambridge, and Sky Publishing Corporation began making plans to merge the Sky and the Telescope, because Charlie and Helen, of course, didn't want to publish two magazines. That wouldn't make any sense. So here's what happened. The Sky and the Telescope were merged into a new publication called SkyIntel Telescope. And the first issue appeared in November of 1941, just a few weeks before the attack on Pearl Harbor and the United States' entry into World War II. Nevertheless, the magazine has gone nearly 80 years now without ever missing an issue. So the Sky Publishing settled into Harvard College Observatory. What you see here is the dome of the 15-inch Great Refractor, which when it was installed in 1843, I think, was one of the world's largest telescopes, if not the largest. And the offices were right under the dome in that white building that you see in the background. Sky outgrew the observatory in the 1950s, and by 1959, Charlie had secured this odd-shaped building a little further out in Cambridge on Bay State Road. And most amateur astronomers throughout the second half of the 20th century knew of Sky Publishing Corp on Bay State Road, and it became a bit of a tourist attraction for amateur astronomers. We used to have people dropping by all the time. By the middle of the first decade of the 21st century, it had become very challenging for Sky to continue to publish Sky and Telescope economically. You all know that by the middle of that first decade of the 21st century, the internet had begun to take a serious bite out of the profits of print publications, and Sky and Telescope was no different than any other, except in one respect it was. Most hobbyist or enthusiast magazines were published by large companies that had multiple titles. So when they would buy paper or printing services or mailing services, they got really good quantity pricing. Sky was just publishing Sky and Telescope, and that meant that its prices were higher than everybody else's, because we just had, at the time, about 100,000 copies going out each month. So we decided to sell to a bigger company. Up to that point, Sky Publishing had been employee-owned. Charlie was one of the original shareholders, of course. By the time we decided to sell, there were, I think 13 or 15 shareholders among the 25 or 30 employees. We sold to a company called New Track Media, which already had or had plans to have a stable of about a dozen different magazines. And in addition to taking over Sky and Telescope, they moved the company because Sky had owned its buildings, but New Track Media didn't want the buildings, they just wanted the business. So they moved us to rental facilities on Sherman Street, which is where we were for most of the last 15 years. After about 5 years, New Track Media sold to an even bigger company called F&W Media. And F&W Media owned the magazine from 2014 to 2019, when through a bunch of mismanagement and poor decisions about the publishing business, F&W Media went bankrupt. Sky and Telescope was actually making money for them, but many of their other titles were losing money, so they sold. And the American Astronomical Society, which I now work for, purchased the magazine. We decided that it made a lot of sense for the AAS to publish Sky and Telescope, and we certainly didn't want to see the magazine disappear. So as of 2019, the AAS owned it. As of 2020, we had plans to move into One Alewife Center, which is still farther out in Cambridge. Nice new office building, freshly renovated. The problem is, you could say, well, why did we need to move? We didn't really need to move, but the F&W Media bankruptcy left the landlord at 90 Sherman Street owed about 6 months rent. And he insisted that the AAS pay that back rent. But that's not part of the deal we struck with F&W Media when we took over Sky and Telescope. So we just told them no way, and we decided to move. Because of the pandemic, of course, we didn't actually move anybody into One A Life Center in 2020. People began going back this year, but we're keeping only small numbers of people in the office at any one time, and most people are working from home at least several days a week. So the more things change, the more they stay the same throughout all of that change of ownership and change of location. We have always been in Cambridge, Mass. Here's the continental United States with a pin in Boston to show you where we're roughly located on the East Coast in Massachusetts. Here's a zoom in. Cambridge is just northwest of Boston. Here's a map of it. And you can see the 4 locations that SkyIntel Telescope's headquarters have been in over the last 80 years. We've moved, I don't know if you can see my cursor. Oops, I guess not. We've moved steadily further away from Harvard University. Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, we could see your cursor.
Yeah, you can see it, but when I touched it, it caused my slide to advance. Okay. So I'm going to leave it alone. Actually, yeah, I don't think I want to fiddle with that. Okay, so we've been in Cambridge all that time. Speaking of things that change, the magazine's design and appearance have changed over the years. This was the look and feel in 1941. It stayed that way for nearly 40 years. It wasn't until 1980 that SkyIntel Telescope had its first redesign. Got a new logo, changed the word "and" to an ampersand, which we've used ever since. And there have been quite a few changes since then. In our 50th anniversary year, we created yet another new logo, this red rectangle with white lettering. That showed up on newsstands a lot better than the old logo, and helped our newsstand sales grow quite a bit in the 90s. And then we made several more redesigns in the 90s and the early 2000s. And the most recent redesign was introduced in 2017. And we kind of went back a little bit to spelling out the name SkyIntel Telescope as it had been in the beginning, as kind of a nod to our long history. The magazine first went full color, I think it was in the early 90s. Took a long time to go full color. And of course, Astronomy magazine had come out in the mid 70s, and they were promoting themselves as the world's most beautiful astronomy magazine, and they were full color. But the people who were running SkyIntel Telescope at the time didn't think color mattered all that much except on the cover. So we didn't have much color until the mid 90s. Coincidentally, that was when I took over. Now, SkyIntel Telescope has changed a lot in look and feel, but it has always had pretty much the same basic content. It has covered astronomy as both a science and a hobby. In the science, we have feature articles by scientists as well as science journalists, short news notes on the latest discoveries from ground and space-based observatories, articles about professionals and amateurs collaborating, for example, to work on variable stars or follow up gamma ray bursts or study the atmospheres of the giant planets year round. And although the images were in black and white at the beginning, the magazine has always had the best images available in astronomy. And now, of course, they're in full color. These were coming from the world's professional observatories primarily. On the hobby side, the magazine has always featured a celestial almanac to tell you what's going on with the sun, moon, and planets this month, a variety of articles on observing projects, both within the solar system and in the deep sky. As the apertures, the sizes of amateur telescopes began to really grow in the 1980s, deep sky observing, nebulas, star clusters, galaxies, and so on, became a lot more popular. How-to articles, telescope making, for example, as well as various hacks you can do to improve your telescope's performance, build your own solar filters and things of that sort. Book and product reviews, and again, beautiful images, this time images taken by amateurs. So if you go back and look at SkyIntel Telescope from 1941 all the way to the present, you'll find all of these things in there still. Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about SkyIntel Telescope's role in education. One role that it's had throughout its history is to inspire and motivate people to get interested in and pursue careers in science. One of those was me. I'll never forget the day that I stumbled across an issue of Sky and Telescope in my, actually it was in a classroom in my high school. Up to that point, I was the only person I knew who was interested in astronomy, and suddenly I realized I was not alone. And eventually I ended up going into the field, not just as an amateur, but as a professional. In the early decades, Sky and Telescope published lots and lots of articles about astronomy programs and activities that were taking place in schools, planetariums, and museums. Remember, in the first few decades, this was before the space age. Astronomy was still a pretty small field, and if you wanted to fill your pages with news about what was going on in astronomy, you had to go beyond the handful of professional observatories and research institutions and mine what was going on among astronomers who were teaching or doing public outreach. So that was a bigger proportion of content in the early decades than it is now. Strategies and innovations in astronomy education, both in the classroom and informal, have been featured in the magazine throughout its history. Many of the articles written by the people who came up with those innovations. Then in 1964, Owen Gingerich, whose name I'm sure is familiar to most of you, he's a famous historian of astronomy and astrophysicist himself at Harvard, he began a new series called Laboratory Exercises in Astronomy. And these were intended for use in the classroom, and they were reprinted and sold by Sky Publishing as standalone products. And over the course of the next 20 years, Owen and numerous other authors published 17 different installments. Here's a rundown of the topics, and you'll see it's wide-ranging, everything from the moon all the way out to the center of our galaxy and other galaxies. I have a favorite. It's the rotation of the sun. That was because Owen invited me to collaborate with him. I was a teaching fellow of his at Harvard at the time, and this was my first ever published article, not just in Sky and Telescope, but published anywhere. And it gave me a taste of what it feels like to publish an article in a popular magazine. And somehow that got me so interested that eventually I was working at Sky and Telescope. So you notice I said from 1964 to 1984. So why did we stop? Well, I don't know about you. I got my first personal computer in 1983. Personal computers completely changed the face of astronomy. Suddenly, there were all kinds of interesting things that you could do with computers that were, in some respects, better than what you could do with a pencil and paper and a calculator. One of them that comes to mind is Project CLIA, run by Larry Marshall, who some of you will know, at Gettysburg College, Contemporary Laboratory Experiences in Astronomy. CLIA very quickly supplanted the printed laboratory exercises as the go-to place to find activities to do with your students in the classroom. And within a decade of the introduction of personal computers, or I should say the widespread adoption, the web came on the scene. And now you had another way to distribute and present interesting astronomy activities. And the one that I enjoy, or that I always admired the most, was the Nebraska Astronomy Applet Project, a whole bunch of interactive tools that would allow students to explore how planetary orbits work, why the seasons occur, why the sun is higher in summer and lower in winter, and how the phases of the moon occur, and all these different things. You can still get those apps, but they're not available as online applets anymore because they were all written in Flash. And as you know, Flash is no longer supported by most computers. So, but you can still get those applets or apps. You can download them and run them locally on your own machines. But there were a whole bunch of these things, and everybody just kind of agreed that the laboratory exercises in the magazine were kind of an anachronism. All right, so let's move to the present. We recently did a survey in cooperation with the Astronomical Society of the Pacific of introductory astronomy instructors in high schools and colleges. This followed a presentation of some AAS and Sky and Telescope ideas at a recent Astronomical Society of the Pacific meeting. And the survey revealed some interesting things. We asked them, among other things, what did they value in Sky and Telescope? And in order of preference, the thing they liked the most was reliable information about current astronomy research and discoveries. The next most popular thing was an overview of what's currently visible in the night sky, because many teachers, of course, take their students out in the evenings to look at the night sky. Articles about specific upcoming sky gazing events, such as meteor showers or eclipses, were the next most popular. And the next most popular was the unique images and illustrations that appear in SkyIntel Telescope. If you want to show a graph of scientific results and you pull it out of a research paper, it's going to be pretty detailed and pretty hard for intro astronomy students to understand. But if that same graph has been reproduced in SkyIntel Telescope, it will have been simplified. The labels will have been added and made more readable. And any bizarre units that might have been used on one axis or the other will have been changed into something that's much easier for a non-specialist to parse. We also learned from this survey that instructors and students relied on both the magazine and the magazine's website. So let's take a look at the magazine's website. So SkyIntel first went online in 1995, but it's had at least 5 redesigns, or at least 4 and maybe 5 redesigns since then. This is the home page as of yesterday. This is the latest redesign that was done after SkyIntel Telescope acquired the magazine from F&W Media. And you'll see, if you just look at the main menu, that again, the top features within the website are the same ones as in the magazine. Science news and information about observing. I'll show you a little bit more of what's on the site in a moment. One thing I do want to point out is that unlike some publications, SkyIntel Telescope does not repost the articles from the magazine all on the website. There is a digital edition that you can get via subscription, which is the entire magazine electronically. But the website is more of a supplement to the magazine or a complement to the magazine. And there is some migration of material from the website into the magazine. For example, news articles will appear online first before they make it into the magazine. And that's just a function of the long lead time to get a print magazine produced. If I write an article today, it'll go into layout in a couple of weeks, and it'll go to the printer a few weeks after that, and then it takes a month to get printed and mailed. So the news generally appears online first. The most popular page is the one linked from the lower left, this week's Sky at a Glance. It's a simple language, just a rundown of some of the celestial highlights each day, with these lovely little diagrams showing you what you'll see if you look toward any particular direction along the horizon. In this case, if you look southeast after dusk, this week you will see Jupiter and Saturn in Capricornus. Here's the news section. We have observing news, like, hey, a new comet was discovered, but we also have news, science news about discoveries in the solar system or made by space missions, exoplanets. You can see the different headings. Here's a couple of articles on black holes. And I'll point out that the authors of these 2 articles, Monica Young and Camille Carlisle, who are both editors at SkyIntel Telescope, both recently won Science Journalism Awards. So we're very proud of that. In the observing section, you can find all kinds of things, not just what's up in the sky right now, but information on all the different kinds of celestial objects that are out there. Calendar of the year's meteor showers, articles about upcoming eclipses, and so on. What you see here in the observing section on this page, the Explore the Night blog, is from our contributing editor, Bob King, who is writing a lot of our sort of up-to-the-minute observing news. In this case, Jupiter just passed opposition, and hopefully you got to see some Perseid meteors earlier this month. Our tools page has a whole bunch of different interactive tools, several of which have companion mobile apps that you can install on your iPhone or your Android device. So here's just a sampling. But these are really wonderful. And it's these kinds of things like when does the red spot cross the center of Jupiter's disk, or which side of Mars am I looking at right now, that you can't get in a print magazine, because you print a map, and it's static, and you can't tell people, well, tonight you're going to see this feature, or tomorrow you'll see that feature. But these apps and these interactive tools on the website are really handy for that kind of thing. All right, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, there's a link to an interactive sky chart or star chart. This is one of the features that I think really makes SkyIntel's website stand out as a very special one. This is, to my mind, the best interactive sky chart tool out there. The main sky chart, which is an all sky chart on the right, looks very similar to the sky chart in the center of SkyIntel. You'll notice at the lower left, there's a sort of misshapen trapezoid there outlined in green. And what's in that trapezoid is shown at the upper left in one of those nice little horizon views. And you can grab that rectangular swatch of sky and move it around. And as you do, the view in the upper left changes to show you a close-up view of whatever it is you're looking at. And you can set this thing, I mean, the website will figure out approximately where you are, and it will figure out what day and time it is. But you can also change those settings manually. So for example, if you're traveling and you want to know, hey, what's the sky going to look like, from the Southern Hemisphere, you can change your location to the Southern Hemisphere. You can change the date to match when you're going to be out there observing, and you can get a display of what the southern sky will look like. And you can, like with any desktop planetarium program, you can control how much information is displayed, whether you get constellation lines and boundaries and things like that. So if you haven't used SkyIntel's online star chart, I strongly recommend it. It's a really great way to learn your way around the sky. All right, so if you want to find out, if you want to get access to the full library of what's been published in SkyIntel, you used to be able to use our DVD set, but the DVD set was made with software that no longer works. We're hoping, now that the AAS has the product, we're hoping that we can get that software updated and reintroduce a DVD set that covers not only through 2010, but all the way up to the present. In the meantime, the next best thing is if you go to SkyIntel's index page on the website, you can actually download an Excel file that has a nice chronological index of every article that's appeared in the magazine since the first issue. It's very easy to search, and then you can either look it up in the library, or if you have the DVDs, even though you can't use the software, you can navigate through the DVD directories and actually find the pages. All right, so now let's talk about where SkyIntel might be headed in the future in the context of education. So I wanted to give you some facts about the magazine and about astronomy education, at least as we understand it in the United States. So right now, the magazine has about 55,000 readers. At its peak in 2000, we had more than twice that. But as I said before, the internet has gobbled up a lot of the profits, as well as the advertising and the circulation of print magazines. But we're pretty stable in that 55,000 regime. We've been there a few years, and it looks like maybe we've bottomed out. I hope so, because what we would like to do is grow. Now, here's some troubling information. The median age of a SkyIntel reader is 60. The gender and race of SkyIntel readers won't surprise you. Overwhelmingly male, very few female, and nearly all white. Now, as far as Astronomy 101 or introductory astronomy in the US, and that's all I can speak to because that's all I have data for, there's about 250,000 college students who take it every year, usually as a one-semester elective. For many students, it's the easiest way to take care of a science requirement when they look at chemistry or biology or physics as something that they're afraid of. Astronomy sounds friendlier. Many of the Astro 101 courses, though, are taught by non-specialists, people who are not themselves professional astronomers. One thing that's of great interest is the fact that college students are much younger and much more diverse than S&T's current readership. So let's look at some other context. Go back to that survey. Remember the survey I mentioned that we did with the ASP? Here's some additional results from it. We asked them what they might like to have that they don't have now. Syntheses of new discoveries not yet in their textbook, interactive activities that promote discovery-based learning, clear instructions on how to use sky charts. Everybody has sky charts, but not everybody knows how to use them. An almanac specifically geared to the academic year, so people will know what's up at different times of the school year. A guide to the top naked eye objects and phenomena that students can observe throughout the year, because not all astronomy classes have access to telescopes or binoculars. Some education videos on simple observing techniques. There's lots of educational videos on science topics, but not much about astronomical observing. A truly useful guide to buying a first telescope. We heard from a lot of teachers that when they give an article on how to buy a telescope to a student who asks, what telescope should I buy? The student comes away saying, too much information, I don't know what to do. So we need to find a better way to do that. And a pool of experts willing to be guests in the classroom, mostly virtually, I imagine. So we came up with this idea that maybe a special Astro 101 digital edition of SkyIntel with links to supplemental online content would be very helpful, both for instructors and students. And even if only a small fraction of the 250,000 students who take Astronomy 101 every year were to get access to this, it could significantly increase the magazine's readership. And most importantly, or I should say equally as importantly, it would make the readership much more diverse in age, gender, race, and so on. Well, as we were coming up with this idea, the AAS leadership went through a strategic planning exercise, which has just resulted in the publication of the new AAS strategic plan for the next 5 years. Our mission hasn't changed much. It used to be to enhance and share humanity's scientific understanding of the universe. But now we've added this additional phrase, as a diverse and inclusive astronomical community. So DEI is becoming much more important, not just to the AAS, but unless you've been hiding under a rock, basically to the entire scientific community and much of society more generally. And we added a vision statement to create a world where all people value and benefit from a scientific understanding of our universe. A couple of the strategic priorities actually refer to Sky and Telescope. So to be more equitable, diverse, and inclusive, we want to use Sky and Telescope to advance that. Another strategic priority is to support astronomy education and professional development. And we want to use Sky and Telescope to do that too. Our last strategic plan, developed in 2015 or 16, had no mention of Sky and Telescope because Sky and Telescope wasn't part of the AAS. Well, that exploration is now underway. We have a small group of people we're calling instructional S&T ambassadors who are now testing various samples of content from both the magazine and our website in class to figure out what works with students, what's over their head, what students like, what they don't like. All of the suggestions that came up in that survey are under consideration. We're also thinking about potentially launching a new column in the magazine, specifically geared toward Astro 101 educators and their students. In the effort to improve our diversity and inclusion, we're thinking about adding some occasional profiles of particularly inspirational astronomers who don't look like a typical Sky and Telescope reader, not a 60-year-old white male. And we're also looking at building a searchable archive of specifically educational resources that have been published in Sky and Telescope over the years, but also potentially that come from other places. Now, we do have a few key questions. Most important of them are, what kind of resources would this kind of initiative require? It's going to take people, it's going to take their time, it's going to take some financial support. How can we get the necessary resources if we don't already have them? And what level of cost might instructors and students be willing or able to bear? One of the things that we already know from our survey and from just talking to and listening to astronomy educators is that everybody wants everything to be free. And if it's going to have to cost anything, it can't cost very much, because often the cost comes out of the teacher's pocket, not from the school district. So who's doing this exploration? Well, we have an education committee that you can find through the education menu and through our committees menu. The education committee has a bunch of people who some of you I'm sure will know. In addition, I wanted to point out that the liaison to this committee from the Board of Trustees is our incoming AAS president. So that gives you an indication of the importance of education within the AAS. Also working on this initiative are leaders of the society, the volunteer leaders who are elected, our staff, not the whole staff, but certain of us on the staff who care about this, certain members of the S&T staff, obviously, and a handful of astronomy educators who aren't currently on the committee, but either have been or would love to be, and who have a particular interest in seeing something like this succeed. So that's all I wanted to share with you. Wanted to make sure I left plenty of time for questions, and it looks like I have. Want to point out that our 80th anniversary is coming up in November. This is a sneak peek of the cover of our 80th anniversary issue, all about the future of astronomy, both amateur and professional. And I thank you all very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions. Here is my contact info. Some of you will probably know that I am retiring from full-time work at the AAS as of a week from today, but I will still have my AAS email address. I'm still going to be deeply involved in activities like Sky and Telescope, and I'm involved in the solar eclipse task force that's helping the country get prepared for the big solar eclipses coming up in October of 2023. That's an annular, and April 2024, that's total. And just as I did for 2017, I'm in charge of making sure that everybody has appropriate safety information in the run-up to those eclipses. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm just stepping back and slowing down a bit to enjoy the next phase of my life. So thank you all very much. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Rick, for this thoughtful and full of information, basically a journey about astronomy magazine and how it developed and how it's contributing actually to the spread of science, not only in the US, but all over the world. In my university, we are receiving actually the Sky and Telescope magazine. It's great. It has a great impact all over the world. But thank you. Yeah,
you're very welcome. We do have an international readership. I chose to focus on the US because, you know, that's where our education efforts are basically focused. But anybody who can read English can make use of the magazine, and it is read in, last count I checked was over 100 countries.
We do have like few questions in the comments. So there's one from Sugumar. He says, "In reasons for non-whites, as you claim to not be subscribers, so why you have most of subscribers are whites, and because you gave some statistics."
I don't have the latest statistics on the readership, but if the membership of the AAS is any guide, and usually in some past surveys, the membership of the AAS, the demographics of the AAS membership have tracked fairly closely with the demographics of the SkyIntel readership, with the exception being that among professional astronomers, there are a lot more women, and of course, a lot of younger people, because younger people are students, right? Students coming into the field. So the age breakdown is different. But when it comes to race, you know, it's mostly white, small fraction of other races. And that, of course, is not because non-whites aren't interested in astronomy. It's because of, you know, systemic issues with economics and, you know, and other things. It's not because of their race, obviously. And that's one of the things that we want to help improve by finding ways to reach out to more diverse audiences. And of course, if you reach out to public schools, and private schools too, for that matter, but mostly public schools, you're going to find very diverse populations of students. And then this brings up the question of, well, what, even if you get them excited, well, there's currently this so-called leaky pipeline, right? Where people go who are interested in the science as they progress from high school to college to graduate school, et cetera. You lose women and you lose minorities. And again, it's not because they're not as interested or not as capable. It's because of various systemic forces that we've begun to identify and recognize that are thwarting them at every step. And we want to, remove those barriers. But definitely, in order to reach people, to achieve a diverse readership, you have to get people, you have to find a diverse population to promote the magazine to and to familiarize with the magazine. And a good place to do that is in the schools.
Yeah, I also appreciate actually your new idea. It's great actually to open up to the 250,000 students who are taking an introductory course in astronomy. It's quite a nice idea. But have you thought of creating a SkyIntel telescope for young generation, like for young students? So it will address readership that will grow. So because if you go to SkyIntel telescope, maybe the language and the topics are a little bit higher.
We actually did that in the early years of the last decade. We launched a new magazine. It was a bi-monthly. We called it Night Sky. It was shorter than SkyIntel Telescope. I think it typically, at the time, SkyIntel Telescope was well over 100 pages. I think Night Sky was more like 72 or 68 or something. Night Sky was available on newsstands and available by subscription. And the first year, we shot up from 0 to like 20,000 subscribers or 20,000 readers. And then it just leveled off. We never got any more. And I think the reason was that the market that we were trying to reach, by this point, it's now the middle of the first decade of the 21st century, isn't reading print magazines. If we had launched Night Sky as a website, maybe we would have had a lot more traffic, but in those days, you couldn't charge for content and get away with it. So we felt like we had come up with a great idea, but that the time for a print magazine to appeal to the younger generation had passed.
Yeah, so maybe there are websites that are offering like free content, like the NASA website, right, and so on. So maybe right, these are actually attracting the younger generation. They are having the information for free.
Yeah, and many publications have begun to figure out how they can charge for premium content. And, for example, the New York Times, I believe, now has more online paying subscribers than it has print subscribers. And there are a bunch of other publications that do that. The challenge, we haven't cracked that challenge yet at SkyIntel Telescope, but the magazine, the AAS did a strategic plan, and SkyIntel Telescope, as I showed, is featured in there. But SkyIntel Telescope itself is now engaged in a similar strategic planning process. And we have a team of outside advisors drawn from both the professional and amateur communities who are providing input to the strategic planning process. We're doing market analyses. We're looking really hard at what we need to do in the next 5 to 10 years to reverse the decline of readership and to be able to grow again and to be able to reach younger readers, not just students, but, astronomy enthusiasts who are in their 20s and 30s, who aren't students anymore. So it'll be really interesting to see what they come up with. But I think it's clear when you look at what's happening in the publishing industry now, that although well, there are people who say print is dead, but print is clearly not dead. It may be dying, but even if it survives, in order to reach a significant fraction of people who will be wanting this kind of information in the future, we're going to have to present it electronically, whether it's through an app or through a website or who knows what's coming down the pike, right?
So this actually leads me to a question from Hiristo Stoev in the chat. Mm-hmm. He's saying that what is the time frame for the Science and Telescope Future Plan? What you said.
Well, we're looking at this as as part of the overall strategic planning. The rollout of our strategic plan was for 2021 through 2026. So we're hoping that this initiative we're doing a little bit of testing now, and we're doing the research and thinking into how we might implement something for the future. So the time frame is decision within a year or two as to how to proceed, and implementation within a year or two of that, so that by the end of this 5-year strategic planning period, we have actually accomplished the goals laid out in the strategic priorities. Nothing happens instantaneously, but this particular project is moving right now.
Yeah, so this is basically the question of Sugumar here. So he's saying, what I feel is the economics, and how are you going to reach them? Any plan? Or maybe you...
if I understand the question, you're asking how might we fund this work? I mean, the economics are that, you can't charge very much for educational products because teachers and students don't want to pay very much for them. So in order to do something inexpensively that requires expensive back-end work, you need to find financial support from grants or donations or something like that. So the AAS has in the past secured grants from funding agencies, NSF, NASA. We receive donations from our members when there's a good cause to support. So that's certainly a possibility. Even reaching out to the Sky and Telescope readership for some support is not beyond the realm of possibility. In fact, when the AAS took over the magazine, we actually heard from quite a few amateur astronomers, longtime readers of Sky and Telescope, who said, hey, if you guys run into financial trouble, let me know. I'd be willing to help. Because there's a lot of people who are, feel very strongly about the future of the magazine and about astronomy more generally. If the question, I'm not sure what else the question might refer to.
I think this is what I understood also. Mm-hmm. In the Q&A section, there are 3 questions from Vindra Kanai.
Okay, let me see those.
You could see this. So.
Yeah, do you want me to read them, or do you want?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, so the first one is, how can educators and amateur astronomical societies raise funds to do more work like this and make it sustainable? Amateur Astronomy Society membership and events are usually low priced or free to encourage membership and attendance. Yeah, this is an interesting and perennial question. In fact, I just heard from an astronomical association who asked me if I knew of a good fundraising person, someone to write grant proposals for them. Everybody is struggling with the same problem, which is that, astronomy is not a personal necessity of life. Food, shelter, transportation, childcare, clothing, those are all things that we have to spend money on, and that doesn't always leave much for the fun stuff like astronomy. So professional astronomy has managed to get huge amounts of money from private foundations to help build big telescopes and things like that. But it has been a challenge to get more modest amounts to support education and outreach and things of that sort. I don't know the answer. If I did, I wouldn't tell you, because I would be out there trying to get the money before everybody else does. So do you have any magazine discounts for astronomical societies for their members? hardcover and or soft copy. Okay, well, the magazine is soft. There are both, soft cover, I should say. There are both print and digital editions. And in fact, if you are a member of an astronomy club, you can subscribe at a discount. So if you go online and into the subscription area, you should be able to find a link to a subscription at a discount as a member of an astronomy club. I don't remember I don't know right now if the astronomy club itself needs to formalize some kind of relationship with the AAS or S&T before you can get that discount. But that's a simple, if they do, it's a simple matter of just exchanging correspondence and saying, yeah, we want our members to be able to subscribe at a discount. So yeah, there are discounts for astronomy club members. There are also discounts for American Astronomical Society members. And while right now those discounts apply only to the magazine, the magazine and the digital version, we are looking at the possibility of offering discounts for other things, because as you may know, this SkyIntel Telescope also produces and sells star atlases and books and globes and star finding planispheres and things like that. And just last week, we announced that we have acquired the inventory and publishing rights from Wilman Bell, which is a popular US publisher of astronomy books for serious amateurs and professionals. We may end up offering discounts to our members and to S&T subscribers for those too, once we're able to get them up on our online store. Okay, so the next one is, which is really read and used more, not simply purchased, hardcover or soft copy? So I assume you're referring to the print magazine versus the digital edition. I do know that we have a lot more subscribers receiving the print edition or the print and digital editions than we do getting the digital edition only. I don't know that we have any data on like for the people who get both, which one they spend more time with, but that's an interesting question. One of the efforts that's being undertaken as part of the strategic planning process for the magazine is a reader survey. And although I'm not involved in preparing it, I can't imagine they won't ask some questions just like that. So all I know for sure is that digital subscriptions are a minority, but that's not surprising because of the demographics of our readership. Most of the people who read the magazine are older, and they have been taking the magazine in print form for decades, and that's the way they like it.
Well, thank you, Rick. I only have like comments in the chat thanking you. They appreciate a lot your talk. So I'm calling all the participants on if they have any questions, please raise your hands.
Yeah, I think the comments in the chat, I believe, are only visible to us on the panel.
Yes.
I don't think I see any others that that I haven't answered already.
So there's Sugumar, so I don't know from where Sugumar is. He said that I want to subscribe, but the price was beyond, and they can't pay in dollars. Yeah, that's yeah, that's true.
Yeah, well, certainly. So the price, obviously, in countries where wages are lower and economics aren't as favorable, I recognize and I feel badly that the price of the magazine is beyond many people's means. Partly that's just because of the costs of producing it in a country like the United States, where it costs more than in some other places. We do offer the digital edition at a significant discount off of the print edition. And you can get further savings, as I mentioned, if you're a member of an astronomy club or a member of the AAS, although, then you have to pay for that membership. There's a lot of good content on the website, and I suspect that one of the things that will happen in the coming years is that more magazine content goes online. Will it be free? Not necessarily, but will it cost $50 a year? like the magazine does? I doubt it. So we'll just have to wait and see. As for the dollars, let me mention the store that we have been running, which also includes our subscription, our process for subscribing, has not been meeting our needs. If you looked, I don't know if you saw it on the web page when I showed it, but there's a little notice right now that says "Shop at Sky is under construction." We're on the verge of rolling out a new store, a new online store that will have much better capabilities. I don't know for certain if it will accept payments in currencies other than dollars. I wish I knew that, but I don't. But service to international customers and timeliness of delivery of both magazines and books is definitely one of the reasons why we're changing to a new provider of the e-commerce. So hopefully that between the digital edition, the discounts that you can get for it, and the new online store, with any luck, that'll solve problems for people who currently can't get access to the magazine. But if you still can't afford it or can't pay, or whatever the reason, the website is free. And as I hope I showed you, there's a lot of really good content there, some of which does ultimately end up in the magazine.
Well, many thanks, Rick. So we don't have any other questions. So thank you very much. We appreciate a lot your talk.
You're most welcome.
I learned a lot about the powerfulness of your website. So I'll go and dig it out more. Oh, Toshihiro, you have a question. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I'm from Japan. I make a question that in the introduction of your talk, you said the scan telescope is originated from the strong connection between the, say, educator or the outreacher, not completely pure journal issued by commercial based. So what is the key? And currently the AAS support it's a publication. Mm-hmm. And in Japan, we have two completely independent magazines category. One is issued by the Astronomical Society of Japan, and the other is published completely published by the commercial publishers. So what's the key of the difference? So in the US, the scan telescope style, so the society and the commercial based is strongly linking. That is common, and that is very specialized key to realize this situation.
You've raised a really good point. SkyIntel Telescope was strictly a commercial enterprise throughout all its years until the American Astronomical Society, which is a nonprofit, not-for-profit membership association, took it over. Around the same time, 2018, 2019, several other consumer enthusiast magazines, one that comes to mind was actually a magazine about surfing on a surfboard in the waves, in the ocean, was taken over by another not-for-profit membership association. And the magazine industry looked at this and said, well, this is really interesting because these consumer magazines are now part of a nonprofit. So the financial pressures on them are less than they were before. And because these membership associations tend to live essentially forever, I mean, the AAS is coming up on its 125th anniversary. When there's a match between a consumer publication and a professional society, if a magazine can find a home in the professional society, it might have a new lease on life. It might have found a way, or at least the beginnings of a way, to survive in what is otherwise a very challenging commercial environment with print publications. So we'll have to see. This is the beginning of something new. Sky and Telescope is essentially now also a nonprofit, and the website changed from skyandtelescope.com to skyandtelescope.org, O-R-G, for a nonprofit organization. So it remains to be seen whether publications that began life as strictly commercial enterprises can succeed under professional society ownership. We think they can, or we wouldn't have acquired Sky and Telescope, but there are not very many examples of that happening right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Rick. So maybe I should maybe give the floor to, well, thank you again, Rick, for your precious advisor talk. And then we'll be having like a short break till the next